most important slide. In here, we see that CSS rules are made up of two parts. What are these two parts? The selector and then the declarations. So selector is, before we change the formatting of certain element, we first need to select it, and then we start changing the visual properties of that particular element. Now, the way we select elements in CSS is, these are the main ways of selecting elements. First, by tag, or we define a class and give it a name, and then we can go and apply it to any element we wish. Or if there is in the page, there is an element already that has a name and has an ID, let's be more precise. If an element on the page already have an ID, I can select that particular element and apply some styling to it. So these are the main ideas and the main skills you need to know: how to select element and to apply formatting to, and then what are the most common properties that we style. The most common properties that we style. Okay. Then we already looked at this, how to link CSS to HTML, and the most recommended way to do it is to use an external file, and then you link the file to the HTML in the head part using the link tag. Now let's go into a little bit more details, a little bit more advanced selectors. Here, I just want to make you aware of some other selectors that you might learn and practice later on. But the main ones that you need to be familiar with: tag selectors, named classes, and applying style for a particular tag with an ID. But there are other selectors that I will demonstrate to you through examples. So let's jump quickly to the examples and show you a couple of extra selectors beyond the simple ones. So in here I have a style. Can somebody attempt to describe to me what this style is trying to do, or what it is?
Change our text.
So first, yes, very good. So it first selects all inputs with all tags that are named input. So any tag that has a name input will be subject to this change, subject to this styling. But in here, I'm adding an extra condition. I am only applying this style to elements that are named, that have the tag input, and where they have an attribute called type, and the attribute type is equal text. So this style, I am basically reducing the scope of application. Instead of saying just to all inputs, I'm saying to all inputs that have an attribute type and the type equal text. So this one is an input. Does it have an attribute type? Yes. Is the type equal text? Yes. So this style will be applied to it. So what this style is saying, I want to make this one the width 150 pixels. I want to make it a block element. Now, in HTML, we have two types of elements. We have basically inline elements and block elements. What's the difference between the two? We have inline elements and block elements. What is the difference? Sorry?
Inline, which is a line of subjects, block, which is just ID.
So let me show you an example, and then you will get it. You will describe it to me after this, after you see this example. This is a block element. this is an inline element. And this is an inline element. Okay, let me show this page. And now you can see here, this one is a block element, and this one is an inline element, and this is another inline element. So what's the difference? Yes, please.
The difference in the inline that you can apply the style only to a certain, you write the style in the same line, so you can style it. But in the block, you can call it with an ID class and change the attributes using the CSS.
No. In this regard, there is no difference. You can style both of them the way you wish. Yes, please. Both of them are the same in terms of styling. Yes, please. Yeah.
The block is finishing the line and insert a new line.
Very good. That's it. That's the only difference. Block element, it doesn't accept any element beside it. It pushes everything that comes after it in a new line. So block element has its own line. It displays in its own row without anything beside it. So an example of block element, div is a block element. While inline elements, they just keep showing up. You don't need to have a new line after them. So if you have two spans, you can see here, you have two spans, and they are beside each other happily. There's no problem. But a block, does it allow anything to come beside it? No. So by default, some of the HTML elements are block elements, others are inline elements. But you can change this behavior. You can change this behavior if you wish. So if I want to make this div, this particular div, I want to make it inline. I want to allow it to kind of tolerate other elements to come beside it, not kick them to the next line. I can change this and say display, instead of being block, it will be what? Inline. Now, if I refresh the page, you can see now the div, by default, the div pushes subsequent element to a new line, but in here, I changed its behavior to accept elements beside it. So I changed its display property from block to inline. Is this clear, this property? Block and inline. And to do this, which property we change? The display style. Is clear? Okay, so in here, what I'm saying, I want the input of type text, I want the width, I want it to be 150 pixels. I want it, each input will be in its own line. It doesn't, any other input that will come after any other stuff, any other element that will come after the input should go to its own line. I want to have a margin, bottom margin. So I display the elements and I have a margin in the bottom with 10 pixels. And I want the background color of the element to be light golden yellow. Yeah, and this is exactly what happens. You can see here, the input is a block on its own line, and the background is yellow. So that's what basically styling means. So for example, if I remove this one, just as an example, and I refresh, you can see everything, because input elements are by default, they are block or inline? Inline. So they are displayed in one line, but I don't want my form to look like this. So I change the behave to have every input in its own line. Now for the buttons, so buttons are also input type, but the type is button. They are not, the type is not text. So I want to style them differently. In here, I want the width to be 120 and I want the margin left to be 15 pixels. I want to have a margin on the left 15 pixels. So the idea here, what I want to say is, not only I can select elements by tag, I can further select those elements by putting some condition on the attributes of these elements. So this selector selects all inputs of type text, and this CSS rule selects all input elements with type button. And I can style them differently. Is this clear? Okay. Now, this is a bit more fancy kind of selectors. You might not use every day, but just be aware of them. So in here, what this style is doing, it's saying paragraph. I have so many paragraphs here, but I'm not going to style all of them. I just want to style the first of type. The first in every container. So here, what is the parent of these four paragraphs? What is the parent? Body. They are inside the body. So the first one will be styled red background. But here they have another parent, which is a div. So the first one of this div will be red.
Why not the whole div will be red?
This is what I select. This is the styling I want.
Div here is the first of type, right?
I see. No, but I am applying this only to paragraphs.
Oh, okay.
So I am selecting, so here I am selecting elements and doing further selection on top of the tag. So only paragraphs are the target of my style, but not all paragraphs, only the first one in each parent. Okay, so if I run this, you will see the example. So only the first paragraph of every parent will have a background red. Okay, and other structural elements. Now you can start seeing the power of CSS. So for example, in a table, in here, I'm styling the table saying I want the border to be solid, black solid border, and I want the thickness to be 1 pixel. Okay, now I can now start styling the lines. Yeah, yes, the line, the rows. To be more precise, the rows of the table. Now, what I can do, I can have this. Let me run it just to show you what's the behavior I want to do. The first behavior I want to do is that I want to have alternative colors. We also call it a zebra table. Every row has a different color. It makes it much easier to read. Yeah. So how can I achieve this styling? Very, very easy in CSS. Sorry? Yes. So in here, I can say, I want you to, I'm asking the browser, I want you to select all the rows. The rows that are even, I want the background to be light cyan, this color. And the rows that are odd, I want light yellow. Light cyan and a light yellow. So using this structural selector, int child. So I'll do tr, which will select all the TRs that are even. And here I'm selecting all the TRs that are odd. Okay. Now you can see here the first TR. This first TR has a different color, has a different style. How do I select the first TR? I can come here and say end child and give it number 1. And then I'll say the color I want it to be white and the background color I want it to be gray. And that's why in the first row, I get a gray background with a white text. Yes, please.
Does that mean on every table you would have the first row being the white text and the gray background?
Yes, yes, in any table on this page.
What if you have only one table out of your tables to have this type?
Um,
You give the table ID.
many ways I can do that. I can have a named style, and I will apply it to a particular table. That's the best way. The best way is to create styles with name, and I go to a particular table and I apply the style using that particular class name. And I will show you this very shortly using Bootstrap that we will cover hopefully. We have to get to it because we will see it in the lab. So Bootstrap, as an example, is a library that open source library. Started with Twitter, created it, and then it became open source. This library has so many classes or CSS classes that you can grab and apply to elements. And that will show you how to style tables by applying classes to them. Yeah. So another way to do it is you can have the table has an ID, and you can apply the style only to that particular table ID with that particular ID. Okay. So I hope you get the idea. Is these structural elements allow you to selectively select particular rows in a table. That's the common way where we use this type of structural selectors. Another type of selectors, just for your information, some of the elements have state. For example, an anchor, it could be that I already visited the link. It could be that the link is new, I never visited before. Or I want to style the link based on whether the mouse is over it or not over it. So let me show you, and then I will explain a little bit more. Okay, so for example here, this w3c.com, I already visited before. Okay, so what is the color of this? It's kind of gray, yes? So let's see. Okay, so let me show you. This one is very easy to understand. When I put my mouse over the link, what I want to happen to this link, the color should become red. Yes. So have a look. When I mouse gets closer there, the color of that link becomes red. Now, let me visit this link. Go back. You see here, I visited this link before. You see here, the color becomes green because this link has been already visited. But the first time when I loaded the page, the color was gray. So this is the default color. This is the color when it's visited earlier, and this is the color when the mouse comes over it. And this is the color when it is active. You see here, when it's active, what it means by active. Color black. Yes, active means I don't click on it to visit it, I just kind of select it. Have a look. So what I want to say by all of this is you can style elements based on their state, especially links. Links have different states. So every state, you can style it if you wish. So you can see here, this is more advanced than what you are supposed to know at this stage are the basic selectors. And here, you just need to be familiar that there are more advanced selectors that you might make use of. But in the beginning, it will be kind of a bit of adventure to go into too much details on this. But be aware that there are more advanced selectors than the 3 selectors that we discussed last session. Okay, this state of hover over, it's not only when the mouse is over certain element, it's not only applicable to links. It's applicable to any element. Have a look at this. You see here when I put my mouse over the H element, what happened to it? The background changes to yellow. Yep, is clear? Okay, last thing I want to show you here. Okay, what I'm doing here, I'm creating, whenever you see a dot followed by a name, what does that mean? I'm creating a new class, a new style, a named style. What is the name of this style? Quote. Now, in here, this is kind of special scenario. Can somebody try to explain what this style is trying to do?
Before the sentence or post.
Yes. So whenever I apply this style, take the content of that element and add this text before it, and take the content of that element and add this text after it. So, for example, if it is a quote, it's somebody said this sentence or this text. It's not kind of mine. I can put it between these notations. So this is a style. I give it a name. What is the name of the style? Quote. Okay. So how do I apply it? This is how I apply it. This is a paragraph. And I want to make this a paragraph a quote, which means I want to add these 2 opening and closing around the text. So all I do, I go to the paragraph and I say class equals quote. And then the style will be applied. It will append the opening to the start of the text and the closing at the end. And you can see here, that's the behave. You can see this has been added using style. See, they have been added using styles. So these are more advanced selectors that you kind of need to be aware of them. You can play with them through these examples. Okay? All right, so let's move on. Okay, so far, let me take you back, before I move any forward, let me take you back to the basic idea. We are just going deeper into the idea. The basic idea is that a style sheet, we have a selector, we select something, and we apply some style to whatever we have selected. Now we are now familiar with how we select elements from the page, using either tags or using a named class that we apply to elements, or targeting a particular element by ID, or there are more advanced selectors that I have showed you. Now the next step is we need to learn what are the common elements usually we style. What are the elements that we style? So these, most of the cases, we find ourselves styling text-related properties. Text. You have text on the page and you want to style it. And typically what you change when you are styling this text, either the color, the font size, the font family, the font weight, those are the things that you typically change. Whether you want it italic, whether you want it underlined, text decoration, and text align. So most of the time, first of all, we find ourselves changing the style of the text. Either the font, the color, the size, underlined or not underlined, bold or normal. That's the first thing. Second thing, we already seen a lot of examples. The second thing you will find yourself in a real application that you find yourself styling are lists. You remember lists in HTML? You have unordered lists and you have ordered lists. So these are the things you can do with the styles. So first, sometimes you don't want, with an ordered list, you don't want any bullet points. You just want you want to list the text without any bullets. So what you can do is you can style, you can go to an unordered list and say this, the list style type is none. Okay, or by default, it will be dots, circles. If you don't want circles, you want them to be squares. What you will do, list style type equal square. So you can change the style of the bullets in a list. You can either remove them altogether using none, or you can use other styles. Okay, for this, sorry, these are, I think these are, unfortunately, this is a little bug here. This should be an ordered list and this should be ordered list. Yep. So let me try to change it because it's the other way around. This is unordered and this is ordered. Yep. So ordered list, by default, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. If you don't want that, you can say upper Roman and you get 1, 2, 3, the Roman notation. Or you can have a lower alphabetic order, A, B, C, D, and so on. So you can change the style that way. And very common, we style our navigation links. Our navigation, typically it is an unordered list. By default, it should look like a bullet point, but we can make it horizontal and we make them links as a menu. So let me show you this very quickly. So here is an example. Okay. So let me show you this small example here. What you see here, I have some header, I have some menu. This is the menu. The menu is within a navigation, a nav element. We already seen this. And within a nav element, what do I have? An unordered list. Yes? Unordered list. This is how I start the list, UL, and close the UL. And within the unordered list, what I have? List items. So by default, how the browser displays this? By default, it should be bullet points. But have a look at the display. It's totally different. It became horizontal, and so how this is done? Let's have a look. Okay. So first, let me just remove this styling, okay? And just come back here and just refresh. And you can see this is the default behavior of an unordered list. This is the default. They are bullet points, and are they block elements or inline elements? Block. By default, a list item is a block element. But I want to change this behavior completely. I want to change this default behavior because it's very strange to get a menu like this, especially horizontal menu. Because we might have it if it is a vertical menu, but even with vertical menus, it's quite strange to find it with bullet points. We are used to these menus without any bullets. So I find myself, this default behave does not suit the way I want my page to look like. So I have to go and style this to give it the look and feel that I wish. So that's what I will exactly do here. So have a look. First, I will come to my unordered list, and every list item, the first thing I do, display inline. What does this mean? Instead of every line item occupying its own line, it will be one beside the other. So I'm changing it from vertical display to horizontal. Then I want some padding left. What does this mean?
The padding basically empty space.
Yes, before the element, on the left of the element, I want to have some empty space. What's the length of that empty space? 5 pixels. And I also want some padding to the right. How much padding I want? 5 pixels. And this is why I basically have, you see here these 5 pixels between these guys. 5 to the left and 5 to the right. Okay, and I want the text to be aligned the left, and I want the size to be 12, and I want it to be bold. You can see here I styled the list items, and I gave them totally different behave. Yeah. Now, have a look. When I hover over this, when the mouse goes over it, what happens to the line? What happens to the links? They are styled. What happened to the underlined? The line becomes above. And also the color is changed. So how I do this? So I'm not doing this for all the links. I am doing them only if the link is within a navigation, a nav, inside it, an ordered list, inside it, a list item, inside it, an anchor. If we put our mouse over it, this is the behave. I want the color to be Dodger blue, and I want the text decoration to be overline instead of underline. That's why when I put my mouse here, the line becomes over. Yes? Okay, basically that's the idea of styling the list items. I can change the bullets, I can change from vertical to horizontal display, and your imagination is the limit. Whatever look and feel you want to achieve, you will use CSS to change the default behave to the behave that you wish to see. Okay, so far, the common element that we style are text properties like colors, font, size, and list items. List items to change their behavior. And typically, we style the list items to create navigation bars. They look like navigation bars that quite sophisticated, but at the end of the day, they are just an unordered list that you have styled. Okay, the third thing that we commonly style are the margins, the borders, and the paddings. So first we need to understand what's the difference between them. Let's start with the border. We all understand what's the border? We have an element. The outside of the elements, we can put a border. What about the padding?
Space between every element.
The space between, thank you very much. The space between the content of the element and the border, that's the padding. What about the margin?
Outside.
Yes, the space between the border and other elements. Yep. So the border, we know it, because every element in HTML is a box. Every element is what? Is a box. You can style the box by giving it a border, by changing the space between the content and the border, that's the padding, and by changing the space between the border and other elements, that's the margin. Is clear? Okay. And that's basically the idea. This is my content. This is my border. Between content and border, that's the padding. And between the border and other elements, that's the margin. This is the box model. Every element has this model. And basically, as we've seen here, there are some small examples that I will quickly show you. Here is the border example, just to run it quickly. So you can see here, I'm creating here a named style. I called it 1. And I define that I want a border width. I want the border to be black. I want it to be dashed. I want to have a radius of 15, which means it gives me this little rounding. See here, it's rounded. Here, it's not like 90 degrees. it's a bit rounded. And the board, this one, I want the color to be red. I want it to be double. It's thick and double border. I want the border on the bottom not to have the border on bottom. So I'll say border dash bottom is none. Okay. So basically, you use this type of example styles to style your borders. Same thing for margins. So if I run this, okay. Let me just see some small example. So for example, this style, I called it 1. It has a padding of 30 pixels and a margin of 20 pixels. So let's see when we apply it. So basically, I apply this style to this class here. This is my last one. Okay. So what it's doing is giving a padding of 30. It's giving a padding of 30. So between the border and the text, there are 30 pixels in every side. And also, it's giving a margin of 20. Margin of 20 between this border here and the other border. There are 20 pixels. Okay. So basically, that's the basic idea. The last thing I want to go through is the positioning. So the things that we style the text properties, we style list items, we style borders, margins, padding. We also style the positions where we want elements to be. And to do this, we typically use floats. There is a property called float, and I come to the element and I will say float left, float right, float, usually left or right. Okay? So here is an example. So for example, I have these two images here. I want them to be on the right side, and beside them, I want to have my text. So all I do, I style them, and I say float left, and these images will be displayed on the left. If I do float right here, you can see here, I have two images. One of them, yes, here. One of them is floated to the left, the other one is floated to the right. So to basically control the positioning of elements, I can use the float property and typically left or right. Okay, this is in very quick summary, the main element that we style using CSS. You need to really go through this example. You will have the chance to play with this and practice this in your lab. Now, the last thing in terms of CSS, once you know the basics of CSS, it's very important to know the basics. But in real life, you will not go through and build your CSS style from scratch. Usually, even in professional life, you will use some existing CSS libraries. Already people have built, and you just grab and use in your application. One of such CSS libraries that already exists is called Bootstrap. And this Bootstrap library is so powerful, and it's used for two main reasons. First, it will give you what is known as responsive page, responsive web application, or responsive pages. What responsive page means, let me show you through an example. let's say Amazon as an example. Have a look when I change the size of the window. Let's say I choose this size. I'll choose, let's say, iPhone. Have a look. Amazon, although it is the most popular and the most #1 website in the world, e-commerce website, their page is not responsive. What does responsive mean? Have a look. Where is the menu?
You are not showing the whole page.
Yes, the page does not change its look and feel based on the size of the device. This is not a responsive page. Yeah. Let me show you an example of a responsive page. Qatar University. Is it a responsive page? It is. Have a look. The menu becomes like this. When the device or when the display size is small, the page has adapted its look and feel and has adapted the display based on the screen size. If the web application has that feature, what do we call this? This page responsive. It has a responsive design. While Amazon it does not have this responsive design. Let me show you another example. You see here when I make it bigger, see the menu becomes different. And the layout is different. When I go to a smaller screen, you get a different behavior. I'll show you a last one, which is Mozilla also. It has a responsive design. This is the menu, becomes like this. And you see all the content nicely without scrolling horizontally. The page adapts to the size. Okay, now if I go back, now to achieve this responsive design, believe me, a ton of CSS that you have to write. It's so hard.
For each screen, you have to write the media.
Yes, you have to detect the size, and then based on the size, you change the layout of the page. In Bootstrap, you get this with no effort. Of course, I told you, we wish we had the time to go through and see all the details how to make the application responsive, but we have even in practice, you will not do it from scratch yourself. You will use some framework or some library like Bootstrap to do this responsive design. So that's why we jumped immediately to use Bootstrap to achieve this responsive design. So how does Bootstrap achieves this responsive design? So what Bootstrap does, it takes your screen and it allows you to divide it into 12 columns. Yes? So the screen is divided into 12 columns, but you can group these columns into, let's say, you want to have column from 1 to 6 as one column, and column from 7 to 12 as another column. So basically, you can divide your page into 2 parts. Let me explain this through an example, will be much nicer. Okay, so first of all, to use Bootstrap, one way you can download it. Another way, you can just link the CSS. It's one file, although there are other files, but to introduce the idea, there is one CSS file. It exists already online. You can just add it to your page. You say link and grab this CSS from this location. And by the way, when you learn Bootstrap, please focus on version 4. This is a new version. It has a major improvement compared to version 3. So in this course, we are using the latest version, version 4. And that's the step. Step 1 is you link it. Step 2, you start using it. So Bootstrap comes with hundreds of classes. All you do, you need to learn those classes, CSS classes, and you apply them to your elements. So first, let's say you want to divide your page into 2 columns, 2 parts. Your page, you want to have 2 parts, equal parts, 50% to the first part, 50% to the second part. And you want this size to be dynamically resized by itself whenever you resize the screen. So to create a responsive design, the first thing you do, you create a div, and then you add this CSS class called container. Or if you just use container, let me show you. If you just use container, what it does, it leaves a bit of space from here, a bit of space here, and then gives 50% to the first column, 50% to the second column. If you want to fill up everything, instead of using container, you use container fluid. Okay? If I refresh, it will take the whole space from start to finish, because I defined, how many columns I defined? 2 columns. So my page will be divided in 2 columns equally. Have a look when I resize the page. Even if after I resize the page, I still have how many columns? 2 columns of equal size. As I change the size, okay, see here, as I change the size, the columns change. The size of each column change automatically. That's what I mean by responsive design. Responsive design. Have a look. How do I achieve all of this? I put this in a container. And the container, think of a container kind of a table. It has rows and columns. Okay? So this is the first row. The first row has 2 columns. So I keep using these classes. The container, I give it a class container fluid, and then the row, I give it a class row, and the columns, I give them a class column. And then the Bootstrap will do the magic.
But these are equally spaced columns. What if I want, as you said, for example?
Very good. Yes, I'm coming to that. This is the basic. Now, this is a more advanced scenario. Let me show it to you very quickly. This is very advanced scenario. If you understand this one, khalas, you will get the idea of the grid system of Bootstrap. What I'm doing here, I'm saying there are 2 styles in here. For small screens, I want the first column to occupy 4 columns. You remember the grid is made up of how many columns? 12. For small screens, the first column will occupy 4 columns, and the second will occupy 8 columns. And for medium and above, I want to have equal division. 50% to the first column, 50% to the second column. So what I mean by this is if it is smaller than small, because there are devices that are extra small, then these columns will be one beneath the other, stacked, one beneath the other. I know you need to play with this to be able to grasp it. Unfortunately, time is not helping me. But let me just show you. Please concentrate on this. Concentrate just on this. Yes? Now, have a look. When I change, let's say I change to small, then the first column is occupying 1/3, and the second is occupying 2/3. If I make it medium and above, it's 50-50. This one occupying 50%, this one 50%. If I make it extra small, it becomes one beneath the other. So what I mean is you are dividing the screen into parts, and you can control the size of each part based on the screen size. If the screen size is small, 1/3, 2/3. If it's medium and above, 50-50. If it's less than small, which is extra small, one beneath the other. All of this without any coding, without anything, just using these magical CSS classes that come with with Bootstrap. So the Bootstrap gives us the grid and gives us so many other classes to style whatever we wish. For example, last thing, I let you go. I want to style tables. Have a look. I want to style a table without any effort. I get table like this. And when I resize, it also resizes nicely. And all of this, all I do, I say, class, this is a table. I want it to be striped, which means every row has different color. I want it to be bordered. I want it to, when I put my cursor, kind of there is a hover over. And I want the first line to be dark, the header to be dark. See head dark, it will give me a dark background with a light text. All of this without any CSS. I'm just using classes that come with Bootstrap. Yeah, and the list goes on. Same for forms.